technology, talent management deserves as much focus as financial capital management in corporations. Before we start the session, let me introduce the speaker for today's session. Today we have with us Mr. Harsh Bhosle, Chief People Officer, Nayara Energy Limited. Mr. Harsh is a cross-functional business leader. Harsh has over 3 decades of experience spearheading organizations successfully across cultures and countries. For over 25 of his 30 years of career, Harsh has handled the human resource management function within the organization. He has led teams on delivering implementation of best-in-class talent and performance management systems, leading managing union negotiations, managing organization transformation, establishing employer brands, and leading digital transformation. As a Chief People Officer at Nayara Energy Limited, Harsh manages a team of seasoned HR professionals. Before Nayara Energy, Harsh had a long spell with SR Group. Harsh also held leadership roles in HR functions at Saint Gobain, RPG Group, Scottish and Newcastle PLC, JSW Steel, Cadbury India, and Crompton Greaves. With this brief introduction, I welcome Mr. Harsh Bhosle to today's webinar session. Welcome, Harsh.
Thank you, Professor Ramesh. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
And also would like to welcome the moderator of today's session, Dr. Anita Armadok, Managing Director, Open Space Consulting, Mumbai. Dr. Anita is a global professional, HR system expert. Anita's competencies developed over a 33-year of professional practice enabled her to be a coach who touches and transforms lives and careers. She has received the award of Best Faculty in Management from Bombay Management Association. She is also a certified management consultant and a master trainer. Her corporate career in India spanned over 12 years with the DCM Group's SRF Limited and FMCG major Marico Industries. Dr. Anita also served as Dean of NMIMS University School of Business and Dean of the Center for Human Resources, SP Jain Center of Management in Singapore and Dubai. With this, I also welcome Dr. Anita for today's webinar. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Professor Ramesh, and welcome to Harsh Bhosle also. I'm looking forward to a very engaging dialogue with Harsh and yourself as well.
Yeah.
And I think there are 3 of us who are all experts in talent management, and we are waiting to get the best out of Harsh today here.
Yes.
So
yes.
let's see what we can make of this 1 hour that we have.
Yeah. And I also welcome Raman Madhok, who is the advisor to Sahyadri College of Engineering and Management. Raman, welcome to this webinar session.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and also welcome all the participants, my faculty colleagues for today's webinar. Now I hand over the session to today's moderator, Dr. Anita Madhok.
So hello friends, I know most of the participants here are students and also some visitors and guests from outside of the Sahyadri campus. So welcome to everybody. I'm here today to talk about talent management imperatives for the future. I think it's become a bit of a fashion, everyone is looking into this big crystal ball and looking at it and trying to predict when COVID goes away, first of all, and when it does go away, what kind of workplaces are going to emerge. And just before we started the seminar, we were talking to her. She says, it's good for us to come back to work. And, at least I can be here at work. Otherwise, work was home and home was work. And it was very difficult to differentiate between what is what. So it's good to have a place to come to and work from. And yet there are a lot of people who are going to have a lot of difficulty in making that shift when COVID does happen. And a lot of adjustment problems are likely to also happen when people come back to work eventually. Having said that, I'm here to get the best out of Harsh Bhosle today. And I just want to make a small caveat that in a private conversation with Harsh, he was mentioning that just make sure that everything that I say is from myself as a professional. So Harsh Bhosle as a professional is speaking and is not necessarily the voice of Nayara Energy. Maybe Nayara Energy has their own policies and practices, and Harsh is of course a driver of those. but a lot of his opinions have been culled from his vast years of experience. And where he is today, it's that voice of that total experience that is going to speak to us. So without much further ado, I would love to hear from Harsh about the future of work and the future of HR and the future of talent development. Harsh, please tell us the top 2 or 3 things in your mind that you can foresee, when you look into this crystal ball.
Yeah, thank you very much and giving me this opportunity to speak what I have learned over the period of time. As you have rightly said, these are my personal experiences and personal views which I am expressing. 15% of them I have learned from Raman, because Raman was my manager. So if percentage wise, 5 out of 35, something about 15% is what I learned from Raman. So therefore, I'm saying that this is not only Nayara's experiences, but my own personal and what I learned. Let us go to the first basics. The talent management as a subject is not something which is a standalone subject or standalone topic. It's a combination of everything. Actually, talent management starts right from hiring to retiring. So how do you ensure that the whole process is taken care of properly is the key. So when you say hiring to retiring, that means hiring, whether it is performance management system, onboarding, succession planning, management development program, career development programs, employee engagement, and all those stuff. So everywhere the talent management has or these practices have a role to manage the talent. If to put it simply, what is required to do is look at all these processes and see whether we add value while we do these activities, processes, or systems. And the simple model is something like input, process, output. So all these practices or systems, be it hiring, as I said, performance management systems and succession planning, we need to see uh, what's the process that we are following, and are these processes adding value? What is our going to be the end result? So if we are talking about generating talent, generating successors, generating high motivated employees, or innovative mindsets among the people, so what is it that we would like to drive? So the simple mechanism is to break the processes into small pieces, create a value chain, and see how this can be ultimately lead to value addition. Like, for example, when we do succession planning, what is the succession planning going to be? Whether it is for the immediate purpose, or whether it is for medium term, or whether it is going to be for our long term expansion and implementation of strategy. Now, depending upon the objective, which is your output, you need to ensure what's the process that you're going to do, because the kind of process for succession planning that you will follow for short term versus the strategic succession planning, which will, that when you execute that strategy after say 7-8 years, the entire ball game is different. So you need to then identify the intermittent steps and look at the value addition that you're going to do, right from identification of people, identification of the processes, how do we train them, coach them, which are the competencies that you will develop. So look at the value addition and look at the complete and whether you are going to add value at each stage. So that's the typical input, process, and output. That's a process I think one should follow. When it comes to because whether it is 30 years back, 50 years back, or 30 years from now, this input, process, output is going to be there. Some of the classical HR processes are going to be in this, will still exist. This shape and form will have to change. Now, for that to understand what is going to be the differentiators in coming years, when you talk about performance management system, or your succession planning, or employee engagement, or any other management development programs or processes, 2-3 perspectives which have come to my mind. The first and more foremost is the I would rather call it the overarching perspective, where the entire mindset of the talent or the young talent has undergone a huge change. Some of our some of our uh, gurus in the past, like Sumantra Ghoshal, they talked about individualized corporation, but it was almost 20 years he spoke about it. But going forward, the entire new generation is going to be highly individualistic, self-aware, and self-driven. I don't think that generation would look up to you to show you the direction, show you the path, show you the options. What they will have is multiple options, multiple career choices, and also aspirations. Going forward, as I see, people may not restrict themselves only to their core function. The person who may join a technology firm will end up doing social work, because that is where the person is going to get his or her self-actualization at the end when they start working. Today's generation, primarily I'm talking about talent, means the urban educated uh, people who have worked in corporate lives, and not the ones in rural or agriculture area. So when we are talking about this generation which is going to work in India Inc., are the ones who are no longer worried about roti kapda or makan. So their aspirations are going to be different. They would like to self realize themselves as individuals, and their careers will also take the shape that they want to take. So the whole idea of talent management, therefore, is how do we individualize our systems and process, so that everybody should be able to discover themselves. And in that whole disturbed scenario, when you can't actually plan individual's career, how the organization still generate talent within. So at the one on the one hand, you have a structure in place where you need to have CFOs, you need to have chief marketing officers, and at the end, but some of the experts or some of the high caliber talent within that functions may not opt to go there. So how are you going to meet the talent requirements in the future? Is finding out early the interest levels, not to go by the only the qualifications or the past experience, but also that person's ability and interest to modify those careers. How are we going to then help that person to acquire those options? So these are the some of the things which at overarching level that the corporate world and the talent management professionals who are going to manage this process to look at how do we address this in an individualized way. So setting up context is more important rather than giving the content. The content giving is that please do A, B, C, D, and you will become so and so. Whereas the new talent management process will give the context, and that's where people will discover themselves. The choice will be theirs. So maybe the line managers or the senior professionals or the people who are sitting in talent management space will help them to choose how to choose and all that stuff. Choice cannot be given. So that's my first perspective. The the other two perspectives are little different than this, because normally what we see in the in last 30, 40, 50 years, there are always inflection points in corporate world or in whatever we do in human science, or in whichever field we work in. But in talent management piece, we are seeing two inflection points coming back to back in almost within a decade. One is the technology. So the way technology is changing, and how you are going to address this technology when you are managing talent. We are talking about what you call robotics. We are talking about a lot of areas where these robots will take much of our um, roles which are generally repetitive in nature, where which is the areas where the somebody can predict the behaviors of are driven by the SOPs. So the time may come, people are talking about that you will have your peers who are robos. You could be governed by a robo, or you will have team member who is a robot. So how do you survive in this automated world? So how do you be productive? How do you ensure that that you remain and you coexist with this robotics? And second is the automation and data availability. So big data will be available. So how do you analyze that data? How do you take those decisions? How you will build the critical thinking to ensure that the right data is given and that it gets converted into an appropriate information, which is analyzed, which helps in taking right decisions. Because too much of data will always confuse. You will have dashboards, you will have MIS, everything, but what is going to be critical going forward is largely the judgment and the critical thinking, and that is where you may score more than the robots. Because if even though judgments and critical thinking is going to be repetitive, the robo is going to take over. So continuously innovating the mindsets of the people to keep challenging themselves and the processes is going to be a major talent management issue in coming days. The second inflection point which has come is this COVID scenario. Because as you know, inflection point is that it disrupts the equilibrium, it disrupts the curve. Suddenly there is, I think, sudden drop or sudden drop, sudden surge. So the COVID has brought in changes which perhaps we would have experienced 10 years down the line. Like, for example, working from home for a company like oil company like mine was never thought of. Even we were struggling to get the work from home policy even twice or thrice in a month. But now, last 1.5 years, everybody is working from home except people who are on the field, which is in retail, or those who are in the refinery. And same is with all the manufacturing companies. The factories are working, but all the office staffs and everything is working from home, even if they don't have the erstwhile experience. So this pandemic has definitely brought in a lot of stress and strain in the whole system. But that is why it is an inflection point, because it has also brought in some of the surge in terms of in some other areas. Like, for example, we can always look at now how to optimize cost, how to optimize our talent. Now I keep saying that people doing job in Mumbai have to stay in Mumbai, have to travel by road or train one way almost 2 hours. Now I can get the same job done from somebody who's staying at Nagpur or Bhopal. So that person will just sit at home and work from there. So this opens the avenue for the whole corporate world to optimize in terms of their costs and also to talent availability. It also opens huge opportunity for women to come in and manage their work and life smoothly. Almost 100 years ago, there was a big event which happened, which brought women folks in on the shop floor. That was in the after the First World War, where all the men were on the field and the women came and start working in offices and factories. That was the first phase where women came into the in as workforce. The same thing is going to happen now. I think they will have huge opportunity to pace their life, give space for their life, and also work. And so I think that's going to happen. But it also poses huge challenge, because even we have experienced in last 1.5 years that people have joined remotely and have left remotely. So without shaking hands, without meeting in person. So how do you engage with these people? Because at the end of the day, we are all social animals. We need, man is a social animal. We need to meet, we need to see. The organization culture is all about daily behaviors. So if the new joiners don't see how the managers work, how the colleagues work, how do they exchange views, what they do in during their spare time, during working time, during coffee breaks. So that is part of culture. So if that is not going to be experienced by people, how are we going to build that emotional connect? Because it's always been the emotions and people are together. And the one sec. So the important aspect here would be um, how to build that kind of a warmth or employee connect during this time, and what could be the methodology. Because if you want your talent to perform, if you want to ensure that the people will continue to give their best and align themselves with the organization, what could be the different methodologies by which you can align them so in the coming times? Because whether you like it or not, this hybrid model to a large extent will work, because the organizations have seen that yes, this can it's very uh, uh, provides them huge cost advantages. uh, People are also talking about differentiated policies, so the whole operational opex will undergo huge change. Sometimes capex will undergo huge change because you don't no longer need offices. So it's a huge change that is going to happen. So that's my second inflection point. So yes, so going forward, this is where the challenge is going to come. So how we are going to then challenge our all the talent management processes which I was talking about in the beginning in this new perspectives. So these three areas which I talked about: one is the changing the mindset of the youth, which is highly individualized. Then second is the automation, artificial intelligence, that is the second. And the third one is the COVID, post-COVID hybrid model. So these three things are, these three aspects are going to impact the whole talent management process. And that's where we have to look at, uh, while there you may have to go back to the basics as to what are the essentials of these processes when you make a value chain, and how these three perspectives will have to be addressed when you are doing, say for example, if you are doing succession planning or talent management review, or growing talent from within, so how are you going to address all these within this new three new challenging situations? So that's going to be the future, Anita. That's my crystal ball.
Okay, wow. That's quite a lot of change that's on the cards. And we do see that change is going to get more and more accelerated. The pace of change is going to continue to increase. But we are talking to young students, and they are the generation Z. They're beyond the millennials is the Gen Z. And they're going to come, like you said, very individualistic, very self-aware, very confident. They know their minds, they know what they want, and they don't want to be told what to do, and they don't want to be, told that what they're doing is not good enough, and stuff like that happens. So, which is a wonderful sign because it's a much more empowered generation and self-driven generation than the baby boomers where I come from. And so, but you know what? The leadership doesn't change that fast. Hmm. So the leaders are still going to be from baby boomers or from millennials. The leaders are still old world. There's going to be a whole generation gap, that comes. So how can the leadership of a slightly older generation, what are some of the things that they need to do to change themselves with the changing times? So, in a sense, what I'm asking, what are the new emerging leadership skills of line managers, of CEOs, and of at multiple levels?
Am I restricting only to managing talent or in general? your
In
question.
general, managing people, because the people
Yeah, managing
are,
people.
the nature of people is the way you're saying,
Yeah,
individualistic,
yeah.
self-aware, driven. So,
So,
how do you manage that kind of person? I am so used to telling people what to do
yes.
and
So
getting
you
it
said
done.
what they should do. You asked me what they
Coaching.
should do. I would say they should do nothing when it comes to managing
So we
talent.
don't
Just
need them. We don't
do
need
nothing.
leaders.
You can't do, because if today I have to tell my son to do something, he is not going to follow what I am going to do unless and until he realizes it. So therefore my mantra is do nothing when physically or directing. Just create the context, set the have a discussion, a dialogue, generally asking them questions what they want to do, and once they build that kind of a confidence, that you are not directing them, and then you are allowing them to evolve.
So that means
So I think,
create an empowering context.
yeah, empowering the coaching, what you call classical coaching, that
Coaching
where you
style.
really don't really give them answers. You, let them fish themselves, rather than give them the ready-made fish. They will find fish very very stale.
So it's all about the leader as a coach.
Yes, yeah,
And
it's more of a coaching,
this
creating context.
Professor
Yeah,
Ramesh, who's the dean, he's responsible for some of the curriculum around.
correct.
So teaching these youngsters also what their leadership skills ought to be is
Yeah.
also part of the curriculum.
Hmm.
Okay, so my second question to you was that um, you talked about working from home, and how you can hire someone in Nagpur or Bhopal to be able to do the same job that would otherwise be done from a Mumbai centric and person coming from office a couple of hours a day, going only in the commute. Um, so my question is, uh, working from home has proven during COVID times to be much more stressful than working from office. So there would be a lot of implications on emotional wellness and building the resilience amongst people. If someone's sitting in Bhopal, how do you have that emotional connectedness? And so what would be the nature of organizational initiatives in future to take care of the wellness of people, given a hybrid kind of work environment? Some people coming to work, some working from Bhopal, Nagpur, and different other places.
Definitely when it is going to be virtual working or hybrid model, I don't think there will be ever a situation that the person will never come to office. So while hybrid model talks about the largely they will work from home and largely they will work from office, but both these set of people will definitely be coming to office. Now implication is how to build that the network within the organization. So obviously, companies will have to find the ways to ensure that there are physical meetings. There will be more of seminars where people can come together, the departmental meetings at one particular place where everybody will come together, and maybe the areas where there will be a lot of virtual team sessions, forming small teams to work on various aspects. Besides that, maybe even to the extent of what can be done is involving their families and others also in some celebrations, so that the bonding takes place amongst the people, which is the emotional connect that we are talking about. So definitely the way hybrid model talks about partly meeting in person, partly in office, same thing should continue even with their social contract, social contacts.
This one.
And yeah, that you can't do away with completely somebody work. This stress has come in during COVID situation, as I said, that you were forced to work at home 24/7, and you were cramped at home. You are not even allowed to go out. There was no social contact even within your society. You can't do and go and have a cup of tea or glass of beer in pub or restaurant. So that is adding a lot of stress. If in a normal scenario, out of say 5 days in a week, if I'm allowed to work from home for 2 days and then work come to office for 3 or 2 days, it's going to work fine. because the stress has also built because you are doing everything. Jhadu pocha se leke, everything was at home. So there was no domestic help, there was no friends, there was no weekends out, or there are no evenings out. So the COVID situation, the stress is only for that period of time. So just imagine a situation when everything is free. You can have your social contact and also have work from home and then work from office. It's going to be a wonderful scenario. You can take care of even elderlies at home whenever they want to go to, or kids at home, studies. You can pace your work accordingly, because going forward the IT is also going to enable us to ensure that the performance is properly managed. We don't actually flog that technology of, whether whatever tool that you use in today's time, but very rarely we get into a nitty gritty of managing the daily tasks or the weekly tasks. Now people will use that technology, and so therefore the performance is not going to drop. It is only that you will feel that people are working from the desk, that they are really working. Sometimes they may not be working. They may working quite effectively or efficiently at home when you are not as a boss, that you are not supervising them physically. So these tools will develop, the environment will change, and I think it will be a win-win for everybody.
True. This morning I was listening to the news on the BBC, and in London things are opening up, and offices from Monday people have to come back to work on Monday onwards. And they interviewed some CEOs, and all the CEOs says, we want all our employees back. When they're sitting at home, the work is the second priority, and home elder care, children care, and wife care, and husband care are higher priority as compared to work. So we want everybody to come back to work and show up for work on Monday morning. So it's going to be a huge thing, now, whether to work from home, how much to work from home, and how do we really make the person accountable for the time that he spent.
See, the onus therefore lies, is at the end of the day, it is the economics which will decide. If the corporates feel that the performance levels are dropping, then definitely people will, then everybody will try and come, ensure that they must come to office. So the managers and the employees, they also have to come up and show that yes, this hybrid model really works. Otherwise, we will go back to the basics.
True.
So time will
So
tell.
now my next question is about the automation piece, that you talked about, how automation is going to take over, and, how robotics, you will have a robotic person in a
Line
team.
managers will play in talent management in future.
Okay, request everybody to please keep themselves on mute. Your voices are coming through. Thank you so much. And so Harsh, you talked about how technology is going to change at an accelerated pace. And this is the next 5 to 10 years that we are talking about, not something in the distant future. Maybe by 2030, or maybe even before that, you may have a robotic team member, or you may have a robotic boss, or it's already beginning in many ways. Companies are doing away with performance management systems. They've got your KPIs over there. The performance measures are in place, and all the data is automated. If big data is saying that your KPI is achieved, you get your bonus. If your KPI is not achieved, then you don't get your bonus. So automation is already replacing performance appraisals. So automation is already replacing so much of HR, what HR can do. So if this is the case, if your KPIs are set and, it's being assessed by the system and not by another human being, employees' engagement, the personal engagement that the employee has with the organization, what is the role that HR will play in engaging people, given the robotic interfaces that we are going to encounter everywhere?
It's a difficult question to answer, but definitely this challenges, and human beings find their ways. So what um, I can foresee is that there will be some different side of network that will be built, because it's not that only one individual and 100 robots around him. So it's going to be, even if we say that there are say 50 robots and 50 human beings, or 25 human beings and 75 robots. So at least those 25 people will have to build their network. Those will be definitely very crucial. I have also read somewhere that even robots can be sensitive if you feed them properly. They can also get the sensitivity of the people's emotions if they are properly programmed. So I think the way forward will be to, it's like, the way we have seen in Terminator, where the even he starts understanding why the child is crying. He mean the Terminator doesn't understand how to cry, but he is sensitive, and that was 20-30 years ago thought. So the same way, I think the robots will learn. They will be programmed in such a way, and there will be different set of employee engagement or connect activities where the social needs have to be met. So yes, there is going to be challenge, but we will have to find the way, and there is a possibility. Yes.
I shudder to think, a robot being sensitive to my moods and my emotions, and what will happen to the real relationships then, and what will happen to those real relationships? Will they break down or what? I shudder to think about that, and
Yeah. And so sometimes, whether the person sitting next to you is real or the robot, you never know.
you never know. Android kind of person.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. So it's all exciting and it's all here. It's not like something in the distance. It's not science fiction. It's already happening.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fiction at all. So I have one last question. We are addressing business school students over here, and we've also got some of the administration, and we've got Dean Ramesh also as part of the audience, and Mr. Raman Madok as well. A lot of business school curriculum has remained the same for the last 40 years since I graduated from XLRI Jamshedpur. If I look at the standard OB or organization behavior textbook, it's the same Fred Luthans over the years. If I look at marketing funders, it's always Philip Kotler. Nothing much has changed in business school curriculum. Some pedagogy has changed, more internships, more industry interface, but largely, and a few new subjects like data analytics and things, which we had in a different form in our time also. So nothing much has changed by way of business school education in the curriculum. So how do you feel, the curriculum should change, particularly the HR curriculum, when you talk about human resources, because you're talking about talent development here today. So how do you see the curriculum? If there's a subject called strategic talent development, how will the curriculum of that subject change? I know Dean Ramesh teaches that subject, so I'm asking. As a
It's
stakeholder.
I will be treading on somebody else's toes by answering this
No,
question,
you're a
but
stakeholder. No, you're the person who's going to hire this HR professional coming out from the business school. So what is it you expect that HR professional to be trained in?
I think the most important part of the changing the curriculum is to involve the professionals in large numbers. I've seen in board of studies in many of the, including where I was in NM for some years, and also currently I'm on some other college. Uh, the professionals are in very minorities when it comes to deciding the syllabus. So if to a large extent, the academics continue to be the in large majority, and then what happens is that obviously nobody wants to come out of the comfort zone. So definitely it suits the without any offense to any of the faculties, so it suits the individual faculty members to continue to have this program which is repetitive in nature. So same case study, same syllabus. So that needs to be broken completely. So if it's like, it should not remain the workers' participation in the management, only one worker sitting on the board. The majority of the board members should be from the if or large number, which has the voice to, if out of 10 board of studies, if you add 3 or 4 coming from the industry, change will happen. because then they will challenge fundamentally as to why this subject is still taught, because this is no longer relevant today.
Okay, excellent. That's wonderful input. Thank you. I do believe that there are soft skills that business schools focus on, and that's
Yeah, of
increasing.
course. Now I'm getting into the soft skills and hard skills. They are always, you can always get the job with your hard skills, but when you comes to progression in corporate life, it's all about soft skills. So, but then soft skills cannot be taught; it has to be experienced. So, how do you build that kind of an experience in those 2 years tenure in classes? So, how do you relate there? It's like, when I am also student of political science. So how do you connect this some of the theories into the daily situations? Like, for example, when you talk about Machiavelli, we always talk Machiavelli in a very negative way, Machiavellian way. But Machiavelli has given so much of insights to the leaders. Like, one of the Machiavelli's proposition to the prince is that he should, during the peacetime, he should always go for hunting. Now, during 400 years ago, when he said that it's a pure hunting, but today that hunting is nothing but CEO going into the marketplace, or so when to study the competitor, because when the prince goes for hunting, he knows the terrain, he knows where your borders are weak, from where the rural talent is, where are the hiding place. So he knows the whole geography of his country. So when the CEO, if we apply the same thinking into the CEO's work, the CEO has to go to the marketplace, go to the Juggi Jhopadis, wherever there are product being sold, which are the competitors. That the moment that is converted, that Machiavelli's knowledge is converted into daily life or today's life, people will understand the theories. Now somebody has to transfer those kind of thinking to the today's life. Say Hawthorne experiment and Maslow's theory, how Maslow's theory is not static, but even when the takeover happens, even the CEO gets into the basic needs. He's supposed to be at the actualization need, but the CEO will get in because his job is at stake. So how do you relate to the? That is where the practicing managers will bring in into the theories, whatever.
Wonderful.
Syllabus.
Thank you so much. Now I want to open the floor to all the students to ask questions. And
There were few, I think, but I could not read it because I was speaking. Raman also said something mentioned on the.
so I'm getting some student questions coming in. How will the organization culture impact the talent management process?
Huge, because at the end of the day, it is the culture which decides who will stick around, and the culture is nothing but the shared behavior, shared values. Now, if you want to retain a talent, and if you want to ensure that people will dabble with their different departments, nobody is going to succeed in all the things that they will experiment with. So are you going to punish, or are you going to reward? How will you, if somebody takes a risk of moving, say, from finance to marketing, and the person is not able to do so great, can that person be still considered to be a high flyer, or that person is going to be considered as a failure? Now that's culture. So without culture, no talent management. It's the basic thing, right? Culture is required for having good talent management system.
Great. Um, Another person has asked, how difficult is it to retain talent in the organization during a recession-like situation, the one that we are facing today? I'm
To
not sure.
retain a talent during recession is generally easier. You're high talent because of the fact that there are no other jobs, they may remain. But what is important is that they should never get the feeling that you are, you are ignoring them because the market is bad. Because they will see in the way you approach, even during the recession time, during the bad times, you still have to treat good people well. And whether you give the increments or you give incentives, you need to differentiate to some extent and ensure that the right talent getting rewarded and getting the attention. Otherwise, they will fly the moment there is an opportunity.
Okay, continue to send in your questions, students. I'm reading a question from Chaitra Bhatt. How would you describe the relationship between leadership, succession planning, and talent management?
Leadership, succession planning, and talent management. Talent management is a process. Succession planning is process for the leadership. So it's a value chain.
It's a whole value chain, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. Perfect. What a lovely answer. Okay, there's one question from Raman Madhuk. What is the role that line managers will play in talent management in the future? HR is quite distant from employees in a work from home situation. And how are they being trained by HR to deal with this, with the work from
Uh,
home situation?
Boss is always boss. He will always try to test you. So if I'm not able to, there are three questions, right? One is what is the role of a line manager?
Yeah.
Line manager is the talent manager. HR guy is there to only support by way of having a dialogue, by ensuring that the processes are properly laid down, processes are modified, processes are meeting the requirement. But the last mile, the engagement of the line manager is the most important, because HR may identify based on psychometric and past performance that this person is a talented person and can be groomed. But if the line manager is not bought onto that idea, he will never invest his time. So line manager is the one who will nurture the whole talent. So that's one question. I hope I have answered.
Yeah. And the
The
second
second
question is,
question,
how are employees being trained by HR to deal with the work from home situation?
yeah, work from home. I think there are, of course, do's and don'ts. There are some protocols which are to be followed, and the HR guys, at least in my personal experience, when we have managed this year or year and a half, if I have to say, there are two or three functions globally have performed extremely well, and HR being the first. Second is admin, and third is IT. So I have seen a lot of companies, the HR guys have literally connected with employees, and even during the distress time, there some people got when there was sudden lockdown. Some guys were caught unaware, single. They had no support locally, so the whole HR admin team in different companies ensured that they stay engaged. The essentials are provided. They're individually connected. The companies have employee assistance program where dial in and dialing out facilities were given to talk to counselors. Even during the tragedies at home, the companies have supported. Whenever the rewards function is done, those are done virtually. The families are invited. Even we had invited whenever the awards are given, the spouses, the mothers, the kids, because everybody's at home, so everybody's at office, so they used to join the celebrations. So there are, and definitely the most important is to it's the way during the pandemic the doctors had to take care of themselves. The HR guys also have gone through a huge stress. Some of my colleagues have to manage two or three funerals a day whenever in the second wave. So even there was a huge trauma in their minds. They have seen their colleagues succumbing or going through this trauma. So it was a testing time for the entire HR and admin community. And I think globally, if it was a COVID, it was also the year of HR fraternity in the world.
Exactly.
I'm sure.
I think they had to go the extra mile to engage people during
Yeah,
COVID times.
it was a their litmus test as to how to. And in many companies, I have heard stories that HR have done wonderful job.
Oh yes, oh yes, they are heroes. The HR has emerged as a hero. And
Yes.
before the pandemic, there used to be a lot of cribs and complaints about
Yes.
HR, but now
Yes.
people recognize the value of HR.
In fact, when we walk into the corridor and somebody coming to office, they always say thank you very much, and we can see the appreciation in their eyes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So Francis Ribello, he's a friend of mine and a fellow HR professional and coach. How would you transform the exigencies of post-COVID disruptions into preferential options of compensation for the engaged human assets? So, all the post-COVID stuff that's happened, what kind
Uh-huh.
of impact will this have on the compensation and benefits for human beings?
Okay, so there are three different thoughts. One is the classical same job, same salary. I think uh, I think that notion will undergo a change. Like for example, I was given now the just take for the hypothetical case the housing prices in Mumbai versus the housing prices at Bhopal, and living standards in Mumbai and moving standard in Bhopal. So should we have the same compensation for the same job, or we should also have the third dimension, which is location? So that's going to be a huge change in compensation and benefit. Secondly, the also the various other policies, whether it is leave or any other. So there will be including hiring at the time of hiring, what is to be done, which checks have to be done, all that stuff. So I see major change coming once the situation stabilizes, because at the end of the day it will be economics. Like this, if suppose we keep the same salary levels in Mumbai as well as in Bhopal, somebody is hiring at Bhopal will get 300% salary increase of the giving if he give the same salary, whereas the person in Mumbai may get only 20% because the base is different.
True, true, true. Cost of living is so much
Yeah,
different. In fact, the other day I was looking at again another BBC episode, which was speaking about how new homes are coming up in Dubai, whole new colonies are coming up in Dubai, where the flats are being constructed in a way which is conducive to home working from home. So they have
correct.
like a little study, a library, a little alcove for work, and and a separate area for work as compared to the home area. And it's all on the same level, and there's all amenities provided there. Courier, transport, everything is provided in that building and in that. So they are trying to attract people from cold countries like Norway and Sweden, where the things are cold, to warmer climates like Dubai, and the cost of living is more or less it's much cheaper in Dubai compared to some of those countries. They're trying to attract people to come here and work from home here rather than work from home in a cold place. So,
And in going forward, we may also see a spurt of a lot of satellite offices, and
yeah,
therefore the congestion in some of the big cities will go down. Obviously,
true,
then
true, true, true.
those who are in property business in Mumbai may start getting these shocking results that the prices are dropping.
So Akshata Rao asks, why do MNCs hire bulk graduates every year when they don't have work for them? Keep them on a bench, no project. What's the strategy overall? Now we know what happens, no, in the HR. Yes, we do hire a surplus. I know that.
So that may it's very difficult for me to comment on any other company, but perhaps that is the cover for the attrition, because they may also be seeing, because good MNCs also are very good training grounds, and they also become poaching, the provider of the talent. So as we always say that every CEO maybe in FMCG sector in India would be an ex Unilever guy, or actually if not the second person could be from P&G. So it's like this. So good people join MNCs also with a hope to get better training and better exposure. They get it, and they also find a market. So that may be their strategy, so that they
True.
ensure that the continuity is there.
It's not just MNCs, it's also Indian companies that
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
obviously.
creating a pool of talent. I once did
Correct.
some work for a construction company here in Mumbai, and this company, they needed crane operators, just a simple
Hmm.
talent like a crane operators. It was a high attrition place because everyone was going off to Dubai during the construction boom, and they were coming to the company, getting trained, finding jobs in the Gulf and leaving. So they constantly had to hire surplus manpower in that particular talent so that they had access to talent that was constantly
Yeah,
available.
it must be risk mitigation plan actually.
So it's a
This,
talent pool that you create for
yeah,
high attrition jobs as well as key talent jobs, critical
yeah.
talent jobs. So good.
And what happens is if you work in a good company and get good experience, you can leverage that experience and get a better job Whereas in the MNCs or these large corporations, the growth also is to some extent limited to the whole architecture of the company. Whereas in a smaller company, then you grow faster. That's how people leverage their experience from good companies. So that if that is the case, so therefore you keep hiring large numbers. So if you want to ensure that there are 10 people in the company, and every year 10 are leaving, so you keep hiring 20.
Okay. There's one more question from Chaitra Bhatt. If self-managed teams come into action, you were talking about the new generation and they're self-managed and self-starters. So if self-managed teams come into action, there's a possibility of middle management dissolving and it would be only top management and directly lower management. How different would be talent management in such corporates? Very intelligent question, I must say.
Yeah. So yeah, and yes, the in that case, the role of manager never goes. It is not middle managers who are the only talent managers. The talent managers are your immediate managers. So the moment one layer goes, obviously the layer which is above you immediately is a talent manager. So the top management becomes the facilitators. They have to interact with those small teams, and those small groups of self-managed teams who are their informal leaders, who are their formal leaders, how they interact, how they exchange knowledge from one team to another. So the top managers have to then play the role of middle managers, because if the self-managed teams are taking care of everything mostly, or most of the operational part, they don't need supervisors in between. So it's like delayering, and the accountants will always prefer to have only top line and bottom line. So as much as possible, you remove the middle lines.
True.
So that's the efficient way of doing.
Very
So span
true.
of control is normally where we need supervisors. So the moment the span is not required, so it is self-managed. It's very, very efficient, but it requires a huge amount of trust. It requires huge amount of cultural. Um, it's a very, very matured organizations will reach there.
And only partially, not completely, only in some
No, no.
functions, in some areas, in some places.
Yeah, human nature has not changed in last so many years. No, they dilmange more. There is always some alpha leader. There will always be some
And there will
disruptor.
always be
There
a
will be
need to
some
create a
ambitious
talent
people.
pipeline to the leadership. Otherwise, there's no
Mm,
pipeline, no succession plan for
correct.
leadership. So
Yeah.
that would be, I think to some extent, middle management will always be required
Yeah.
in all domains. But the middle management guys are going to become more and more specialists rather than generalists, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we can have another webinar on that some other day. So this is excellent. This is wonderful, and I'm going to now, give it over to Dean Professor Ramesh, so that he can create a nice, closing statement for us. And you'll have to unmute yourself first, sir.
I have one question to Harsh. I also handle placement for MBA student. Gone are the days, when you stay with the organization for a long tenure, it's called as, strength. Today that is considered as a weakness. Like, today a student hop from company to company within a very short span of time. What is your take on that, Harsh? Like, when you talk about talent management, retaining talent, but on the other side, students in 2 to 6 months, shifting jobs.
So Raman and I are the perfect, speakers on this count, because till our last employment, both of us were average tenure in any company was about 3 years.
Yeah.
So we have seen what is the value add that the job switch give you,
Yeah.
and what is the advantage that you have when you are in a company for a longer period of time.
Correct.
So whenever there is a job switch, I always tell people there are 2 or 3, 4 factors which you have to consider. One is that definitely a growth job. It should not be that you end up doing the same job. There has to be substantial change in your compensation. Okay, so you don't change for a meager change in compensation. And the third and most important is the change of a better brand of the company. So you should be going from a in the brand hierarchy, you should go to the better brand. And the fourth, which is never cannot be valued, is your own equity in the organization. Because the moment you change the organization, you start with a zero base. Where I was in Cadbury's and I joined Jindal with Raman Madhok. I had to prove right from the day one that nobody. I was selected based on my Cadbury's job, but I could do my job only because what I could do, and not because I was from Cadbury's. So it's a zero base. So you have to prove right from the day one, and it takes its own toll. It's not easy. So to keep reinventing yourself every 3-4 years, it takes its own toll in the because once you are in the company, you have your brand equity. You can always leverage. There are always ups and downs in your life. There are always ups and downs in your performance. If once you establish your equity in the company, people will tolerate. Even if there is a dip in the performance, there is a problem at home and you have taken very long leave, you are medically down or whatever. So there are pros and cons. So value that your equity and those three mechanical factors, which is compensation, the job, and the company's brand. Go for it.
Yes.
If there are ticks in all the four, go. If there are no tick in one of these, think before you change.
I think thanks for those insight, Harsh. I think it is quite a wonderful session. Being a teacher of strategic talent
Can I
management.
add to that answer also?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I'm a
yes.
little bit from the old school, and I stay whenever I've changed jobs. It's been after a very long deliberation and long innings in organization. I feel that, if I'm in a job, I'm learning something new every day. When I wake up in the morning, I feel like going to work. And I know that, my compensation is fine. I don't need much more than that. And I know that my relationships are good and I'm contributing. I don't need to change
Yes.
just because I'm getting better salary or a better position or a better branded organization or a better higher rung in the ladder. I don't need to change. I have to you have to reach your level of satisfaction and your level of, connectedness with your workplace. Once you're a member in the organization, you're part of the family of the organization. What's the need to change? Sorry,
Yes.
it was an opposite point of view.
No, Anita, it's not opposite. It's definitely a perspective. And since you have used the or word, you are with me. I would say you are with me because I said compensation and the role and brand name and the subsequent you are going to a good company where there is no chance of you losing your personal equity. Go for it. But the moment there is an or, I said I'm with you. So
So
no
you've got to
change.
examine the pull factors and the push
Yes.
factors as
Yes.
well. What is pushing you
Yeah.
out from the job and
Yes.
what is pulling you from to another
Yes.
job? Because
The
otherwise,
stickiness.
just skipping a job for the sake of skipping it is,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
which I've seen young
Compelling.
guys
The
make those decisions.
job change has to be compelling. Even the somebody who is not in your shoe will also take the same decision. It should be as compelling, and always consult some well wishers before changing the job.
Yes. Okay. It was a wonderful session. I think student got a lot of insight, maybe with the practical experience of Harsh, working in corporate for more than 30 years. I think one point I completely agree with you. Now we are going for autonomous. I think it is maybe you know, some hint for us to have corporate guys on the board of studies and panel so that when you develop curriculum for the students, who are going to be the talent of future. I think that's where the beginning has to happen. With the change in the course curriculum, definitely that is something that we can ponder around. And Harsh, thanks for accepting our invite and being part of this wonderful webinar. A student got immensely benefited out of your experience. I'm looking forward to interact with you more in the coming days. Thanks a lot for
Yeah.
being part of this.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Raman, for
Yeah.
giving me the
Thank you.
opportunity to
Thanks to
express
Anita for
myself.
moderating this session, and thanks to Raman sir for connecting us. This is also more important. I think in a way, Anita, with her experience as a mentor and coach, I think she moderated the session really well. Thanks to Anita and Raman sir, as always, source of inspiration and, connecting. I think he has helped us a lot in this pandemic to connect with corporates. I think this is going to add a lot of value to the student in the coming days. Yeah, and also
Thank
thank
you,
all
sir.
the
Thank you.
participants for making this session a great one. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
and all the best to everyone.
Thank you to everybody, all my associates who have also come and attended. I can see our Sati Aish Dharap and Mr. Kurian, who is the National Vice President of ISTD. He's also
Yes.
here. So there are many people from my contacts group who are also here. So thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
you.
Good luck.
Good.
Yeah.